Well, this morning we are wrapping up kind of this short series that we've been in. And this entire series has revolved around a pretty difficult question. What do you do when nothing you can do? Like, what do you do when you find yourself in circumstances and there's no way to fix it? Like, there's no way out. There's no way forward. It just is what it is. It could be that maybe your marriage ends and you find yourself in a place that you never wanted to be. But there's no way out. There's no way to fix it. Like, this is your new normal. Or maybe you find yourself in a marriage that's really become kind of a disappointment. Now, nobody wants to walk away from the marriage, but he doesn't want to change or she doesn't want to change. And so it just kind of looks like this is just the way it is. Like, what do you do when there's nothing you can do? Or maybe your career has gotten derailed. Like, at one point you had big dreams, you had hopes, you had plans, but it's all kind of come tumbling down. And those dreams and those plans have died. Or maybe there's an ache in you over one of your kids, maybe several of your kids, because maybe they've along the way made some really horrible decisions. And their life, as you look at it now, is so hard. Like, they've really limited their options. And at one time when they were little kids and you saw them growing up and you saw their personalities, you saw all that could be. And you had those dreams and yet sadly it just hasn't come to be. And the painful reality is, as you look at those kids, you realize it's probably never going to come to be. Maybe you're afflicted with a health issue and it's chronic and it's debilitating. And the hard part is it's here to stay. Like, you can treat it, you can try to manage it, but it's not going away. These are what we could call these in the meantime seasons. And when we find ourselves like neck deep in the meantime circumstances, it's very easy to have some pretty dark thoughts. We start telling ourselves things like, I'll never be happy again. Or, nothing good can come from this. Or there's no point in continuing. And when we're dealing with like a significant level of disappointment and frustration, what happens is that starts to seep out and affect our view of God, because there's something just in us that when things don't go our way, when things don't work out, and we look toward the future and all we can see is the same bad stuff, something in us starts to wonder, like, God, where are you? Right? Like, God, what are you doing? Like, God, do you see? Do you see this? Do you care about me? Do you care about this? God, are you even real? And so the first week of this series, we looked at the lives of two friends of Jesus, guys that he loved deeply. We looked at John the Baptist, who was thrown into a dungeon. And then we looked at Lazarus, who got sick, and then he got sicker, and then he got sicker, and then he died. And yet, even though Jesus loved them and respected them, even though Jesus loved them dearly, he did not come to their rescue. He allowed them, for whatever reason, to walk right through their circumstances. He loved them, but he let them face adversity. And in that, we recognize that the presence of adversity does not equate to the absence of God. And that the feeling that God is absent does not equate in any way to him being apathetic. And so we said it this way. This is sort of the way we've been thinking about this. That when we face in the meantime circumstances, God is not absent, God is not apathetic, and God is not angry. But it's so easy to start to wonder about all of this stuff, right? And part of why that is so natural for us is because underneath all of that, there's this underlying assumption that just sort of bubbles up. And the assumption is this, that life equals God. So life equals God. In other words, if my life is good, right, and I'm getting all the stuff that I want and things are happening and there's momentum, it's like, oh man, God is good, right? But when life is not good and I'm not getting what I want, and the things are not happening for me, and there's no momentum, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change. When things are not good, then of course, God is not good. And when we start thinking this way, then disappointment with life becomes disappointment with God. And so last week on Easter, we looked at Jesus, and we looked at his attitude about his own adversity from the cross. We looked at the way Jesus, in the middle of all of that mess, prayed intimately to his Father from the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." The way he prayed as he breathed his last, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." We looked at the way that he trusted God in spite of his circumstances. And we looked specifically at the way his faith, as it was being expressed from the cross in that unbelievable moment, changed the destiny of the man being crucified right next to him. Like the faith of Jesus from the cross led that criminal to suddenly have some understanding and some realization about what was happening and make a final request. And he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "Today you will be with me where? In paradise. Today you will be with me in paradise." Because, and this is what is so amazing about what Jesus was communicating, because my thoughts about you are not reflected in what's happening to you. My thoughts and my love are not reflected in what you are experiencing. I am not, and God is not, your personal experience. And from the cross in his final conversation, Jesus communicated something very powerful to any of us who were going through adversity at any point in our lives. God does not equal your life experiences. He wanted us to see, wanted us to understand that God can be trusted in spite of your experience. That God does not equal your life. So if you're in the middle of one of these in the meantime seasons, you need to know that God sees. You need to know that God cares. You need to know that God loves you very, very much. And that even if like this criminal on the cross, even if you brought the pain on yourself through some horrible decisions, the difficult experiencing that you're having from that, even that, is not a reflection of God's heart toward you. And so today, as we wrap this up, I want to look at the most famous sermon of Jesus. And I want us to look at the message that he gave to some very broken people. And I want us to think about how they responded to that message. Now, the people that he spoke to, I think it's like helpful to get our minds around what they were like, who they were. They were mostly peasants. They had very little money. They had very little access to education or health care or any of the stuff that we kind of take for granted. And they were brutally oppressed by the Roman Empire. They were taxed, they were subjugated, and they were devalued every single day. They had, in a sense, lived their entire lives in the meantime. So they were really wanting something. They were really hoping for something. They were waiting and waiting and waiting for God to deliver them, for God to send his Messiah to rescue them, for God to give them power to overcome their oppressors, to help them once again regain their independence, regain their dignity. And so along comes Jesus. And he's teaching, and he's healing, and he's doing miracles. And rumors are spreading all over Judea and Galilee. And people are coming from all over. They are flocking to see him. They're flocking to hear him. And people are starting to wonder, could he be the one? Could he be the king that has come to restore Israel? And that's when he kind of gathers all these people and gives them the speech to get it all going. And so you have to envision now, the crowds are huge. We're talking at the very least hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands and thousands. And so you imagine this moment. Jesus has been doing all this. There's buzzing in the crowd. There's all this anticipation. And Jesus uses this moment to give a speech that will launch his movement. Matthew chapter 5, starting with verse 1, it says, "Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them." And so here comes the revolutionary, world-changing words of Jesus. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." How about that? That's inspiring, right? It gets stronger. Don't worry, it gets stronger. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." Okay? "Blessed are the gentle. Blessed are the considerate. Blessed are the humble." And you have to imagine at this point, like, the crowds, they would, like, this has been like, when he sat down and was ready to speak, they're just like, shh, 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 shh. And it's just going through the crowd. They're all just like waiting, right? And this is what they're getting. And you have to imagine, like, they're confused, right? There's a guy in the third row, and he sort of raises his hand. He's like, "Hey, Jesus, I'm sorry to interrupt and everything, but, like, are you from around here? Like, do you know what's going on? Do you know how oppressed we are? Like, do you know how the Romans are exploiting us every single day? And you think the way forward is going to be by being gentle and considerate and humble. Do you know where that kind of thing has gotten us? Like, seriously? And Jesus is like, okay, wait, there's more. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Jesus filled with what? Righteousness. Okay, get this. "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." Another question. Peacemakers. You want us to go around making peace. Do you really think we will stop the corruption and all the injustice by making peace? You really think we can, like, get our land back? You think we can get our rights back? You think we can get our dignity back by making peace? "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Wait a minute. We're following you because we don't want to be persecuted. Right? We're following you because we want to live better. We want to live differently. We're following you because we're trusting you to change our circumstances, like to fix our problems. Well, blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. "Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Jesus wraps up, and you got to imagine it's a Braveheart moment, right? He's been riding the horse back and forth, and he's just like, "Who's with me?" Right? And everyone's like, they were acting about as excited as you guys are. Like, yeah, not so much. And so maybe the crowd was, like, what? And maybe they're just kind of elbowing each other going, well, let's hang around for a minute, because, like, maybe he'll do a miracle or something, like. The speech isn't going anywhere, but something might be cool. And you think about it, really, this is the speech that launched the movement that we're still a part of. Okay, Jesus, so you're telling us how this is going to be. You're telling us what to expect. You're telling us that if we follow you, this is who we're going to be. So let me see if I got this right. A little recap. We are poor, sad, meek, righteous, merciful, pure, peaceful, persecuted, insulted people who are waiting for a reward in heaven. Is that who we are? Is that it? Is that what being a follower of you is all about? And you feel like this is going somewhere. And of course, the thing about Jesus is, like, he knew stuff. And he knew that kind of stuff would actually change the world. He knew that within 300 years, the Roman Empire would be overcome not by swords, not by bloodshed, but by humble kindness, by love. Jesus knew that within a few generations, Christianity, not from the top down, not through military might or political or economic power, but through kindness and love and humility and service, would become so prevalent inside of the Roman Empire that the emperor himself would become a Christian. But that thought on that day, on that hillside, was inconceivable to Jesus' audience. So he's like, okay, let's switch metaphors. Let's talk about something a little more tangible. So he says, okay, I get that what I'm saying is tough. So let me just give you two word pictures to help you figure out who you are and how this is all going to work. And so his very next phrase was this. He says, you are the salt of the earth. Now, everybody in the audience knew what salt was. Salt was a preservative. Because, of course, they didn't have refrigeration. So salt was a preservative. And for those of you that don't know what a preservative is, this may be the most informative part of the whole morning. A preservative is a substance added to food to prevent decomposition due to chemical change or bacterial action. Yeah. See, without refrigeration, when there's no preservative, some of you may have experienced this before, things decompose. When there's no preservative, things rot. Where there's no preservative, things stink. So here's what Jesus was saying to his audience that day, and he's saying to us today. You are the preservative of the entire earth. See, if you don't preserve, then what happens is the earth rots. If you don't preserve, then culture stinks. If you don't preserve, then things on earth are going to get real bad real fast. Now, Jesus was speaking things into a world where might made right. Like whoever had the biggest army, they decided what was right and everybody went with that. Moral issues in his day weren't really moral issues. Ethical issues weren't really ethical issues. It was simply a matter of who has the most swords, like who has the most chariots, who has the most men, who has the most firepower. And in that world, women had no rights. Children were completely devalued. Mercy, compassion, generosity, humility, they weren't held up as virtues. Those were the things that characterized the weak. It was a world that we can hardly even imagine. And the only way to imagine it, really, is to go and visit some other place in the world, some other country, or some culture somewhere that somehow still operates by that kind of worldview. And what we struggle to appreciate in the Western world, okay, the Europe and North America, what we struggle to appreciate as Americans is this, that much of what we just sort of assume is common human decency is not so common at all. It has been taught and it has been learned. See, like our culture, regardless of the faith that any individual within it happens to embrace, our culture still reflects a Judeo-Christian value system. In many ways, it still does. When you think about the way we value marginalized people, whoever they may be, whether it's disabled or anybody that is marginalized in any way, we value them. And we just sort of assume that the rest of the world thinks like we think. We just sort of assume that everyone has always thought like we do. Guys, that is not even close to true. And the way Americans are is how Americans learned to be. And so much of what's beautiful about our value system, and not all of it's beautiful, but some of what's really beautiful about it in our culture, it can be traced all the way back to Jesus on a hillside one day. People took what was new that day, what was brand new thinking, and they embraced it, and they passed it on, and it spread, and it has now come all the way down through 2,000 years of all sorts of rocky circumstances. It's come all the way down to you and me. And so we live in a world now where women are more valued than they have ever been. We live in a world now where children are considered precious. We live in a world where things like generosity and compassion and mercy and humility and self-sacrifice are held up as virtues. We exalt people who display those kinds of things. And to tell you the truth, because this is the only culture most of us have ever known, it never occurs to us that these things have not always been valued. But I'll tell you what gave birth to these values. It's the idea that there is a God that loves all people. Like red and yellow, black and white, right? They are precious in his sight. Men, women, and children. There's an ethic that began in ancient Judaism, and it was developed and expanded on in the first century by Jesus of Nazareth. And the first century disciples, they grabbed onto it, and they lived it, and it was contagious, and it caught on. And I don't think we've stopped to fully appreciate this. But we benefit every single stinking day from a worldview that says men and women and children have value. That men and women and children are somehow made in the image of God. And see, that thinking is not so intuitive. I mean, let's face it. We hear about things in our world going on like human trafficking, right? We hear about slavery in other countries. We hear about the way children are trafficked all over the world. And we think, how could anyone treat someone like that? And it's very simple. They don't see the world the way you see it. And the reason they don't see the world the way you do is because you have been taught to see the world the way that you do. And I'm telling you, Jesus, whether you believe in him or not, whether you think of him as the Son of God or not, has had a lot to do with the value system that you personally have come to embrace. And Jesus taught us that God is not like Zeus and Jupiter, these petty, jealous, angry, egotistical, human-like gods. Jesus said God is a father. God loves you like a perfect father. God is not this pantheon of gods that just play with humans. But God actually loves. God actually loves us, all of us. And if he loves you, he loves me, and if he loves me, he loves you. And suddenly, I have value. Suddenly, I have worth. And I better be real careful about how I treat you, because you have value and you have worth too. In fact, Jesus said, by this one thing, he said, just this one thing, by this one thing, the world will know that you belong to me. How you, what? How you love. How you treat, how you value, how you care for, how you love one another. Jesus said, that's new. And that's different. And if you will allow it to, it's going to take hold because you are the salt. You are the preservers of the earth. And then he said this. He said, not only that, but you are the light of the world. I want to show a dark world something different. I want you to reveal that there's a different way to live, a different set of values to embrace. I want you to show people a way to live that they have never seen. And Jesus continues, he says, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. He says, the point is for the world to see it. God is going to make your life visible. He's going to put you up like a city on a hill where at night, when that's all lit up, people can see it for miles in every direction. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. And see, when you have a light in your house, usually we like to put that somewhere where it can light the house. And the idea that Jesus is getting at here is that God has and this is a crazy idea maybe, God has strategically placed you in our world to give light. And I think for many of us, we look at that and we go, no, I don't think so. Because you don't understand, I'm not strategically placed. I was actually transferred here from St. Louis, and I didn't really want to come, and then I got here, and I lost my job, and I couldn't afford to bus back, and now I'm stuck in this stupid place where it rains all the time. If you notice, it rains here. I'm not strategically placed. I'm like a misfit just trying to find my way, man. And I wonder if Jesus would say to that, nah, that may seem random to you. But if you let yourself be, you can be a strategically placed light. No, Jesus, I'm not strategically placed. I'm like a freshman. Right? I have to go to this stupid high school every day, and nobody pays attention to me, and I can hardly find my locker. I'm not the light of the world. I'm not strategically placed, Jesus. I'm supposed to be, Jesus, working at Microsoft, and they didn't hire me. They made a huge mistake because I'm awesome. And now I go to work every single day with all of these losers. I'm not strategically placed. I'm stuck with all these idiots that I don't even like in a stupid company where I'm not supposed to be. And Jesus said, well, if you're my follower, you're light. And so you go be light everywhere you go. And maybe, just maybe, you have been strategically placed. Jesus said, you don't put light under a bowl. You put it up on a stand. But I think when we're honest, we look at Christianity in our culture. Christianity, the problem is in our culture, Christianity gets confused for Christianity. Right? I mean, people are like, yeah, I've seen it. No, thank you. Because a lot of Christians in America, they have no interest, zero interest in being salt or light, right? That's not what life is about. That's not what following Jesus is about. I mean, they're just like salt and light, like whatever. I don't think so. Because I just want to pray a prayer. Like I did at camp in 6th grade, or, I went to this Young Life thing in high school. I prayed the prayer, and so I'm going to heaven one day, and then like I go to church, because that's what good Christians do, and so I'll do the church thing, and it's kind of inspiring sometimes, but like salt and light, not my thing. Really, when I'm hanging out with my family or my friends, or I go to work or whatever, I just kind of do whatever we do. I talk like they talk. I act like they act. That's how I do, man. But that was, of course, never the intention of Jesus. And he goes on. He says, in the same way, let your light shine before others. And here's how some people like to read the next part. That they may see your church attendance and say, dang, he's a good Christian. Look at me, God, I go to church. I'm a good Christian. I'm going to heaven, right? I don't want to be a light. I don't want to be salt. I just want to be like a Christian. That's Christianity. And that's how people want to read that sometimes. But if we look at what Jesus said, here's what he said. He said, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And this is so powerful. He's saying, I want you to live your life in such a way that when people see your good deeds, they don't just say, oh, he's a nice guy, or she's so nice, or she goes to church, They see your deeds and they think, whoa, are you kidding? Who is that generous? Right? Who is that compassionate? Who cares for new people and people that feel out of place the way that she does, the way that he does? Who takes in kids like that family does? That guy right there, he would give his right arm to help you. That guy right there would give you the shirt off his back. Jesus is saying, I want you to live your life in such a way that it is like extraordinary. I want you to live your life in a way that blows people's minds. I want your good deeds to be so extraordinary that people begin to connect the dots between your lifestyle and your faith, your lifestyle and your Father in heaven. I want you to live as a dot connector. And in the first few centuries of Christianity, and this is what people don't understand in our culture. In the first few centuries of Christianity, the followers of Jesus, they embraced this. They embodied this. They got after this. And they were known for unthinkable acts of service and kindness. Like some of them, they'd go down to the river and find children that had been discarded and abandoned, and they would take them into their homes, even though they had their own children that they were struggling to feed, even though they were dirt poor. They did that. When plagues broke out in the small towns and villages, everybody fled, right? Everybody just fled. The pagan priests, okay, Zeus and Apollos and they were the first ones to leave. They were the first ones to know about a plague in town because people brought the sick to them first. And those pagan priests looked at all the stuff and looked at the skin of these people and they went, whoa, they saw this thing breaking out and they're like, honey, pack everything up. Okay, we are leaving right now and there's a plague in town. We got to get out of here. And they left like skid marks on their way out of town. You know who stayed? The Christians. And they would nurse people that they barely knew through a plague. And they would show compassion to the sick and the dying. Often, of course, they would contract the plague themselves and they would die right alongside of those they were caring for. But they just refused to abandon them. And pretty soon, people all over the empire started to ask questions, like, what is up with these people? And you know what else they noticed? That Jesus followers, they're not afraid to die. Weird. I mean, maybe they know something I don't. Because they're not afraid of death. And see, they lived their lives in such a way that the pagan world, these worshipers of Zeus and Poseidon and all the Roman and Greek gods, they began to see the followers of Jesus and connect the dots. And within just a few hundred years, the Roman Empire, the mighty, powerful Roman Empire, was turned upside down. And it wasn't because of good preaching. Guys doing what I hope to be doing. It was because of radical and powerful living from everyday people. Men and women and children who took seriously the invitation to be salt and light. And so, in this culture where being a Christian mostly just means I believe there's a God and I go to church, I think Jesus would say, don't settle for Christian. Be salt. Be light. Now, if you're sitting here going, what's that? What does any of that have to do with an in the meantime season? Here's what's striking to me. The people who wanted Jesus to fix their lives, the people who suffered horribly underneath the Roman Empire, the people that were poor and were sick and were marginalized, they're the very people that became salt and light. And here's the crazy thing. For the most part, Jesus didn't deliver them from their stuff. They weren't suddenly set free from their adversity. They began to recognize that God was still present, that God was still at work, that they were deeply loved, and even in the middle of horrendous adversity, they could still live with peace and hope and joy. And they embraced something that Jesus is hoping that you and I will embrace. That even in the midst of adversity, I can still be salt and light. And I'm just going to say something. Guys, if you look at history, the most influential Christians, the ones that have left a deep, deep imprint of Jesus on this world, the ones that have found joy and that have found peace that actually lasts, that transcends even through adversity, they are the ones that have discovered and embraced this. That when adversity has come, the question for them has turned from, why is God allowing this? And why isn't God delivering me from this? And the focus has instead become, and this is mind-blowing, but it has become, how can I be salt and light wherever I am now? And you know what else people sometimes discover? And it's the craziest thing, is that sometimes adversity makes us more powerful. Like, many of the most influential Christians have discovered this. Sometimes I become more influential as a result of my adversity. Here's the thing, like people that have endured adversity, people that have somehow walked through it and yet continued to love others and love God, those are the people that have most captured the world's attention. You think of like we might be fascinated by like Paris Hilton and the Kardashians. Okay? And you go, I'm not. Well, other people are, but we might be fascinated by them. We are not inspired by them. People living lives that we perceive to be free of adversity, like the silver spoon people, they aren't the ones that inspire us to greatness. It's the people, it's the ones that have walked through some sort of adversity. And so I just wonder about you, if you're in the meantime season and you're facing some adversity in some arena of your life, could God harness your adversity to actually give you greater influence? What if God could? What if God would? What if God is? And I just want to close this series by telling you a little bit about my experience and a little bit of a in the meantime season where for me a change in my perspective changed everything. And many of you, have heard bits and pieces of some of this, but Jen and I, when we were planning to come down here and start this church, we were a part of a huge church up in Bellingham, and it was financially doing well. It was doing well in every capacity. And we went to them and said, would you come alongside us as we start this church? And we were sure they were going to do it. I went to the elder board and I shared the vision for it. I met with every single elder, and they were literally sitting across from me at Arby's or wherever we met, telling me why it was going to work. And I was like, babe, they are going to unleash the resources to come alongside us to do this. So they had their elder meeting, and the chairman of the board sent me a quick email, said, oh yeah, sorry, it's been like a week since we met. Yeah, it's been like a week, dude. But we have decided not to come alongside of you. What? So we were at ground zero. We had nobody to come alongside us to help us do this thing, and we were stuck. And many of you know that I won't go into the whole story. I decided to get a job. I had just decided to get a job to feed the kids and the wife. I got a job, and I was just looking for something temporary because we were about to go start this church. So I got a job working in an oil refinery doing structural steel construction. And I hated it. And when I was there, I'd been in there for a couple of months, and it was just about to come to an end. I got word that this church thing wasn't going to happen for a while. And I was going to have to work there indefinitely. Or do something else. And I ended up working in that refinery for a year and a half. And I was just, at the beginning of it, just like, God, what am I doing here? I'm trying to do your work, your will. What are you doing? And I would go into that place, and it was a scary place for me. I felt like I don't know how to relate to these guys. Half of them didn't graduate from high school. Some of them are missing some teeth. I used to talk like them, but I don't anymore. And just like, this is so weird. And I would go into that place just like, man, God, what are you doing? And very quickly he started to get my attention to go, you want to do ministry? Minister to these guys. Love these guys. Do you want to go lead a church someday? Love the people that I'm putting right in front of you right now. And so I would walk into that place and put on my coveralls and my hard hat, my safety glasses and my ear protection, and then I'd just grab everyone and say, let's talk about Jesus. Not so much. So, but it was a matter of being able to love and to walk with them and to be humble and to allow them to teach me how to do construction, which I had no idea how to do. And the amazing thing is when my perspective shifted from, God, what are you doing? You've completely let me down, to, oh, okay, you're calling me to be salt and light where I am right here, right now. I'm telling you, the whole picture changed for me. And I made some unbelievable friendships in that place. This guy named Mike was a big burly dude, a welder, and I don't know, God just sort of set it up. One day it was the summertime, and my job was to go help him with his welding, which means I'm like, nice job, dude. And it was quiet where we were. As part of the refinery, it was super quiet. We didn't need ear protection. And he knew that I was a Christian. He knew I went to church. And all of a sudden, he started asking me questions, and unbelievable. And so that led to more dialogue and more dialogue and more dialogue. And finally, I said, hey, man, would you like to get together and just like read the Bible sometime? And he's like, with you? You're like trained. You're like a professional. Are you serious? And I was like, yeah. And so we got together. The only time we could find that worked was 5 o'clock in the morning. So we got together. I said, I'll show up at your house. You make coffee, man. And he made the coffee, and we opened up the Gospel of John, and we started reading it. And I said, do you understand what that's saying? He's like, are you kidding? No. And so we started talking about that, and those conversations went on and on for a year. And he was going through marital issues and parenting issues, and that stuff was huge. We had a woman on that crew that was a closet alcoholic. And God enabled me to be in her life for that season. And it was really a beautiful thing. She was a stunningly beautiful woman working in an oil refinery with all these men chasing after her, making inappropriate comments. And I found out a few years ago she killed herself drinking too much. But God enabled me to be a part of her life. She was on our crew, and we worked together every day. We had a guy on our crew named Tony who was this, I don't know if you've ever had these guys at work, that's just this like fidgety, wiry, like way too much energy kind of guy. And, you know, when the boss says do this, he's like, phew, and he's off. And everyone else is like, slow down, dude. You're making us look bad, you know. And he would get real upset real easy. And so everybody's just like, they just love to pick on him. He was a little newer than me, and they loved to pick on him. And their whole thing, even my big friend, burly friend Mike, that I'm trying to teach to act like Jesus, he's like, wind them up and set them free, you know. And it's just like, come on, man, you know, you can't treat him like that. And so I did everything I could as we sat around lunch tables and all that to make Tony feel included and to get him to be a part of that. And I think God used that. There was a time when they were picking on him and it was merciless, and the boss had called him out to go do something, and it was kind of one of those days where it was slow, and so he was the only one, and the guys thought it would be hilarious to hide his hard hat. So they hid his hard hat, and he couldn't find it, and he thought maybe he misplaced it, and then he realized after frantically running around for like 10 minutes, and the boss is like, where are you? You know, and he's just freaking out, and they're all laughing and high-fiving each other, and they put it on this chain thing and put it up high because it was in view, so he should be able to see it, and so he was running around with everybody, and no one would help him. And I remember he finally figured out where his hard hat was, and I was in there, and he finally got it. And as he was on his way out the door to the truck to go out to the job site, he looked at me and he goes, I can't believe you didn't help me. And I remember, like, do you ever have one of those moments where you're like, man, I just biffed that? Like, God just goes, what are you doing? And so I went to him and I apologized to him. But I thought about it later on, and I was like, at least he recognized that I should have, and that he expected that from me. And I didn't make that mistake again with him. Like, every opportunity, how can I make sure he's included and we're not picking on him? And I believe that in that year, God did some really cool things in that place. But I'll tell you, the key for me was that shift in perspective from, God, why aren't you doing what I want, to, God, what do you want for me to do now that I'm here? And I know some of you are in some extraordinary, in the meantime, situations. But I just wonder if possibly you might become more influential in some ways to some people as a result of your adversity. And if you allow God to, and if you don't dwell so much on all the things God isn't doing for you, and you say, God, what will you do through me? It's extraordinary what God will do. It's extraordinary. And I look back on that season in the refinery and go, God carried me through that by giving me a mission, by giving me a vision of what could be. And I know you go, well, your in the meantime season was having to work in a refinery. Let me tell you about mine. I get that. I get that. But I'm just telling you the way the people who have followed Jesus have gone about this, and the way that it has impacted our world. And I'm just telling you, I'm not telling you the easy way. I'm telling you the Jesus way. He's offering it to you, and you can choose to embrace it or not.